So I'm putting together this presentation to summarize a review article that I stumbled upon that really sums up everything I've been seeing in the clinic when it comes to oxalate-related disorders, particularly bladder pain syndrome, but there's so many other conditions that can be associated with this. But I wanted to get this together in a presentation to help people understand what I'm seeing so that you can understand it's not just coming from what you're eating as far as the oxalates coming in. That's really a minor, well, I don't want to say minor, but not a very major contributor for most people, although there's some people who are coming from vegan backgrounds, and yes, for them it could be, or even mold overgrowth, which I've talked about before, but this is what I'm finding to be really significant, especially those people who are already on a low oxalate diet and they're still struggling. So if you're one of those people, you really need to listen up. So this review article was published in the Department of Urology in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and it was in 2012. And basically it's talking about the Glyoxal Formation and Endogenous Oxalate synthesis and the role that this Glyoxal pathway plays. So calcium oxalate kidney stones are common in the United States, but the concentration of oxalate in the urine is a risk factor for the stones. But what we're finding is glyoxal metabolism is an important contributor to urinary oxalate. And then there's endogenous sources and exogenous sources, which I'll go into. But here is a snapshot of the Nutreval test that I do, which is really critical because it helps sum up basically what this article is saying. So you can see we can measure oxalates. As you can see with this one, they're high. All three are high. So that means that this person is endogenously producing it, but also probably getting contribution from either mold or certain bacterial or fungal overgrowth in the gut, as well as probably exposure to the diet. You can see the creatinine is low, so there's definitely something going on with the kidney that's being affected by this. And then you can see glutathione, which I'll talk about, is low, and there's some lipid peroxidation. And you can also see there's a little bit sign of in the normal range, but creeping up higher of this marker here, the 8-OHDG, which is your marker for DNA damage. So obviously this person is definitely experiencing damage on a cellular level and also mitochondrial. Of course, you know you should get your nutrigenomic testing as well. It's really important if you're doing an investigation to have everything looked at. And so of course I like to look at the different genetic pathways. The big one is obviously your endogenous oxalate pathways, which is here on the bottom. These are the four main ones. There's actually another one that's missing, which is your it's called DAO, deamino oxidase, not listed here. Should have been. And then obviously biotin and B6 metabolism should have been also here as well, but they're in different sections of the Tree of Life software. Then there's the NRF2 Keep 1, really critical antioxidant pathways. I'll talk about antioxidants here today. And then obviously your glutathione is critical for healthy metabolism of glyoxylate. So endogenous oxalate synthesis makes an important contribution to the amount of oxalate excreted in the urine. And the metabolism has been proposed that are coming from a number of substances that you can see listed here. So that includes things like glycine, which is an amino acid found in protein. Sometimes people take glycine as a supplement. There's phenylalanine. As you know, that's also another amino acid. Some people cannot actually take phenylalanine if they have a condition called PKU. Tryptophan, hydroxyproline, glucose, fructose, pentose sugars, ethanolamine, and glycolates. And it seems like hydroxyproline from the research makes about a 5 to 10% contribution. So it's a big contribution to this. And everything else has a more negligible. But of course, if there's, accumulation of all of these, you can see a accumulation of glyoxylate. Now, glyoxal is one of the most important sources of endogenous oxalate synthesis in humans and other organisms. And glyoxal production and oxalate synthesis are associated with oxidative stress. So I can't reiterate this enough. I have to hammer this home. This is a really important concept. I just don't understand why people aren't getting it, why people are so hyper focused on what they're putting in their mouth as far as these crazy diets, keto, carnivore. I don't understand it, but maybe in the next decade, people will start to come around and understand. But the research is there, the evidence is there. I see it on labs. Mounting evidence is suggesting that both glyoxal production and oxalate synthesis can be associated with oxidative stress. You got it. Now, it's really interesting that I'm finding with blood sugar chemistry. Every single patient that walks through my door has some level of blood sugar dysregulation, whether it's hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. Both of them are bad. So having low blood sugar, high blood sugar, neither are good. You want to have balanced blood sugar. I can definitely get some clues when I do blood chemistry testing, but also the HTMA can give me some ideas of what's going on with different ratios. So there's evidence, both inferential and direct, that glyoxal is involved in endogenous oxalate synthesis. I said this earlier, but they actually were able to get the inferential evidence studying diabetics, and I found this very interesting. Diabetics have higher plasma glyoxal levels, and they believe this is due to increased lipid peroxidation and protein glycation, as well as increased urinary oxalate excretion. And interestingly, they also have a higher risk of stone formation. They did these studies where they incubated glyoxal in these liver cells. But that's not important. What's important is glyoxal can be converted to glyoxylate, which is the major precursor of oxalate, and this is dependent on NAD. So it's an NAD-dependent reaction. And this possible metabolism that I'm discussing here, as you can see in the picture, is where we have the conversion of glyoxal to oxalate. So you can see here we have glyoxal, and there you have glyoxylate, and then it can actually go here and become oxalate. Now, interestingly, I have seen people who have polymorphisms in D-amino oxidase up here, and that's your glyoxylate to glycine, which is where you want to have. You want it to go this way. So if there's a polymorphism here, this could be inhibited. And then there's the reverse conversion of glycine to glyoxylate, which uses this AGXT B6 dependent enzyme that I see polymorphisms as well in. And then that can shunt over here using NAD. So NAD is a good thing, but again, it could be a bad thing if there's too much or too overactive. And this is via lactate dehydrogenase, which I've actually seen people have high levels and low levels of this, and that can shunt into oxalate. So you can see there's a lot of different enzymes that are involved in this conversion. And as you see, glyoxal requires glutathione right here via glyoxylase 1 and glyoxylase 2 to become glycolate. So if we don't have enough glutathione, it's possible that that glyoxal can form glyoxylate, and then there's a potential pathway that it can go into oxalate. And another enzyme is interesting that is involved as well in this conversion is aldehyde dehydrogenase as well. So you're asking, what is glyoxal anyway? It's an alpha oxoaldehyde, and it's grouped with two similar alpha oxoaldehydes. So we have methyl glyoxal and 3-deoxyglucosone. A lot of tongue twister words. Now, all of these products are products of metabolic and oxidative reactions, and all of them can cause cellular damage and apoptosis. But what's interesting is they're involved in the formation of advanced glycated end products or advanced glycation end products. We call them AGEs. Remember, I say AGEs make you age. We also get production of this in how you prepare your food. So obviously we talked about if you fry your meat or if you're eating things that are high sugar, high fat, that are cooked at high heat, you're going to get the production of AGEs. Well, your body can actually produce it this way as well. And AGEs have been linked to long-term chronic diseases such as diabetic retinopathy, neuropathy, and nephropathy. So you can get neuropathy and you can have problems with your kidneys, which is then you can get kidney disease. And this is where there's a link between diabetes and kidney disease. So now glyoxal, the stuff that I'm talking about, is detoxified using the glyoxylase system in the cells of bacteria, protozoa, fungi, plants, animals, and humans. So we have the ability to do this. but there's other enzymes as well. And one of them is aldehyde dehydrogenase, which can oxidize glyoxal to glyoxylate. So there are endogenous sources of Glyoxal. This is auto-oxidation of carbohydrates, yes, carbohydrates that you eat, and ascorbate, which you can get from like ascorbic acid. Degradation of glycated proteins, I just talked about. Lipid peroxidation, which you can get from this peroxidation of your polyunsaturated fatty acids, and directly from your glucose, from your food. Exogenous sources include your diet, so beer, wine, tea, coffee, yogurt, bread, rice, soybean paste, and soy sauce. And this is not like foods that contain oxalates, right? Wine, beer, tea, depending on the tea, of course, but we're talking about glyoxal here, okay? So these are exogenous sources from your diet. And then environmental includes cigarette smoke, smoke from residential log fires, vehicle exhaust, smog, fog, household cleaning products, and can be introduced in the air as well, the soil, the groundwater, seawater, and sediments. So there's lots of sources of glyoxal. So this image kind of shows you all the different ways that this can happen. I found the glucose interesting. It's called a shift-base intermediate. It's basically a functional group that contains carbon-nitrogen double bond. And what happens is once this shift base is formed, it can exist in a form that rearranges itself to this product that can be oxidized to form an advanced glycated end product, or can undergo auto-oxidation and then produce this glyoxal, as you can see here. So there's that form, and it's the mechanism from these glycated end products that can produce this glyoxal production again. There's also other ways too, galactose, mannose, fructose, ribose, arabinose, ribulose, and glyceraldehyde, acetone, adenosine, and mannitol, and glycerol can also do this as well. So there's lots of other carbohydrate products that can go through this pathway. And then there's other things such as lipid peroxidation, as I talked about here, from your polyunsaturated fatty acids, and that's your omega-6s, yes. So if you're eating a high omega-6 diet from, vegetable fats and even some animal fats, it can go through lipid peroxidation. That's something I can measure. And this is another source of glyoxal. And also, as you can see, your ascorbate can go there as well. So many different ways that your body can actually do this on its own without actually, as you see, nothing here says, plant-based foods. You don't see anything here. That's a different way to introduce oxalates directly. These are all indirect ways your body actually produces it. Here's what's really interesting. Glyoxal conversion to glycolate requires glutathione, and that's a healthy pathway. You want that to happen. So I do measure that. I see so many people are low in glutathione. I know I personally really struggled with glutathione when I was really sick. I had none. And I think that was a big contributor to my condition. And this occurs when glutathione is depleted when there's oxidative stress. But other enzymes such as aldehyde reductase, aldose reductase, and carbonyl reductase, aldehyde dehydrogenase, and others may be involved in this metabolism. So what happens is elevated intracellular glyoxal can inhibit some of these enzymes. And two of the ones that are really important that it inhibits is glutathione reductase and also NADPH producing enzymes. So high glyoxal on its own can produce your reactive oxygen species and also formaldehyde, and they can increase your cell's susceptibility to hydrogen peroxide and disrupt mitochondrial membrane potential, and you can see how toxic this really is. Please don't run and go get glutathione. You may not be a good candidate for it. I think so many people are like, let's just take glutathione, but your body makes this. You have to harness your body's ability to do so. So definitely running your genetic test is key, because you have to know what enzyme pathways you've got polymorphisms in, because if you have, let's say GSR and you have 2 copies, you could really get messed up with glutathione because you're not recycling it, and so you'll end up having more oxidized glutathione than reduced. So it's really important that you just don't run and do that. Test, don't guess. That's kind of my motto. This image is phenomenal. It just shows you how your body makes glutathione, and all the nutrient cofactors that are involved. So once again, test, don't guess. You can see all these things are involved in making your glutathione, whether it's your omegas, your magnesium, selenium, lipoic acid, riboflavin. This is why I do all the testing that I do and recommend the supplements that I do. They're so effective alone without needing any harsh interventions. You can really, really promote your own body's production of glutathione. Other things can also increase the rate of Glyoxal metabolism and are protective to the cell. And these are like all your antioxidants and NADH generators. Interestingly, xylitol and sorbitol were actually included in that, which I was surprised by. So antioxidants reinforces the hypothesis that free radicals or reactive oxygen species produced from lipid peroxidation may contribute to the toxic effects of glyoxal. So the extent of cellular damage caused by glyoxal accumulation in liver cells could be decreased by the use of glyoxal traps. And there's some things that are listed, for example, arginine and cysteine. And they prevent glutathione depletion and lipid peroxidation from occurring. Now, thiamine deficiency, I thought this was interesting. Your B1, thiamine deficiency increases the liver's susceptibility to glyoxal toxicity. Another reason why I recommend higher doses of thiamine for patients who come to me. So these studies demonstrate that glyoxal metabolism and its toxicity are very complex. And obviously, we're still, I'm sure there's lots of research that's still being utilized in this, but I find that, again, reinforces how it's really dependent on your biochemistry and not just, doing these crazy diets, which drives me crazy. So when it comes to calcium oxalate in the tissues, there's two different types. There's oxalosis, which is actually deposition of calcium oxalate in your tissues. And it can be either hereditary, such as primary hyperoxaluria, which I showed you a snapshot of some of those genetics, or other mechanisms. The accumulation of small amounts of calcium oxalate crystals in the absence of poor oxalate metabolism has been termed dystrophic oxalosis. And this is reported in a number of tissues, and this is alarming. This includes in your arteries, so atherosclerotic plaques, myocardium of the heart, lymph nodes, testes, thyroid, breast, ocular tissue, the eyes, kidneys. And they found that in this one study of calcium oxalate deposits in coronary artery plaques, there was 4 patients that all had chronic diseases that increase oxidative stress. And these includes things like AIDS, hepatitis, sepsis, and heart disease and cancer. So calcium oxalate crystals are also found in lymph nodes, testes, and thyroid. And they usually say, it says here that in the thyroid and breast tissue, it's linked to benign more than malignant, but I don't 100% agree with that. I have seen evidence that calcium oxalate in the breast tissue has been associated with breast cancer, but that's what this study was saying. And in the eye has been reported in glaucoma. So again, a common theme of many of these disorders is oxidative stress, which we believe promotes the generation of more glyoxal and its metabolism to oxalates. Let me repeat that again. They may promote the oxalate deposition in these tissues. This may be impacted by the duration of oxidative stress, how long you've had it, and then they cited an example of end-stage renal disease is associated with oxidative stress. So the evidence is there. I'm hoping I'm convincing you of this. Okay, one more time. Common theme of many of these disorders is oxidative stress, and we believe promotes the generation of more glyoxal and its metabolism to oxalate. This may promote the oxalate deposition described in the aforementioned tissues I just mentioned, like the thyroid and the eyes and breast, whatever. And this may be impacted by the duration of oxidative stress. I think the amount that should have been listed here too, but for example, end-stage renal disease is associated with oxidative stress. So coming directly from this review article. So what can you do? Well, first, test, don't guess. run the right labs so you can identify what your sources of inflammation and oxidative stress are. I cannot emphasize how important this is. This is an initial investment that you have to do, but it's not something you have to do all the time. Some labs you may have to repeat once in a while, such as the HTMA, that's a critical one, but that's not a very expensive one. And then maybe the mycotoxin test periodically, but generally it's just an initial investment to see what's going on inside your body. It's really important, and the nutrigenomic piece is something you should not neglect. It's such an important test just to understand what your pathways are, not for just now, but really for the rest of your life. Because as you get older, obviously your body's going to change, and it's important to understand your own pathways. So that's number one. Then you're going to want to follow a low oxalate, anti-inflammatory, autoimmune paleo, natural food diet, and avoid following any strict diet plans that omit large food groups long term, like the carnivore diet or a keto or veganism. I think we're omnivores. We should eat a little bit of everything. That's how we were equipped and built. Of course, sometimes these diets are helpful in the short term to kind of reduce the body's inflammation, but long term can be actually counterproductive. You're going to want to diversify your diet. Think the rainbow colors of rainbow colorful diet, lots of rich pigments that are very beneficial for your gut microbiome and also your immune system. These are like sending signals to the cells of your immune system. And they also are full of antioxidants. So a lot of these foods that have colors in them also are antioxidants, but also when you have a diverse microbiome, well, they can produce antioxidants. So it's important to support the gut microbiome. You're going to want to reduce your toxic burden, and that's obviously done with avoiding things that are toxic, of course, and also supporting your phase 1 and phase 2, but also your phase 3 detoxification pathway. So you can see in this image, there's a lot of different external influences of toxicity, the endotoxins, exotoxins, such as your bacterial endotoxins. So that's important to make sure that you don't have dysbiosis and focus on healing the gut. But then there's drugs and chemicals and agricultural toxins, food additives, household, microbial, and a lot of these are also lipid soluble, and so they are really difficult for your body to remove. And so you have to go through these liver detoxification pathways, and if they're suboptimal, which you can see how many nutrients are relying on these different reactions like oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis, dehalogenation, and then we go through and we have to have the antioxidants available, because once we go through phase 1, there is an increase in reactive oxygen intermediates, which need to be neutralized. And then we go into phase 2, which you may be familiar with a lot of these, like glutathione conjugation, glucuronidation, sulfation, acetylation. These are the pathways I talk about when I run the nutrigenomic testing. And many people have polymorphisms in these pathways. So it's important, because if you do have a polymorphism, you may not be equipped to be efficient in these pathways, and they will need to be supported more nutritionally. And then they have to get excreted, which is why it's important to have bowel movements, at least one bowel movement a day. In fact, a Chinese doctor once told me that one bowel movement a day is pretty sufficient. You don't really need more than that. So that was a relief, because I think sometimes we think we need to have 2 or 3, and actually having 2 or 3 is a bad sign of poor digestion. So you want to have the one bowel movement a day. Lastly, follow the 80-20 rule. I always say 80% of what you eat should be something you would have killed or grown yourself. You want to limit artificial and processed foods and drugs, for that matter, and that includes birth control, and even hormonal contraceptives or even hormone replacement can be very toxic to the body, but you have to work with your medical doctor to make sure that you are, doing what's appropriate for you. So I'm not guiding you to go off any medication, but you have to be cautious, because when there's polypharmacy, there's a lot of toxicity. You want to limit artificial processed foods, practice intermittent fasting. This is so important. We are equipped to be eating and then not eating. And this is really important when you see issues such as blood sugar dysregulation and problems with blood sugar chemistry. Oftentimes this is due to the fact that we haven't been doing the right things, and one of them includes intermittent fasting. Get moving and exercise. Exercise is critical not only for your brain, for your metabolism, but also helps reduce insulin resistance and improve insulin sensitivity. Again, goes back to that blood sugar chemistry, which we now know having issues with your blood sugar chemistry can also upregulate your oxalate production. And get natural sunlight. It's a natural source of vitamin D. You have receptors all through your skin on your body that absorb vitamin D from the sun. We spend way too much time indoors, and we need to get back to nature. And so that's the end of my presentation. I hope that this was helpful for you.